So a few nights ago, CNN streamed George Clooney's Broadway debut, Good Night and Good Luck, live on their platform. And this was the first time that a channel has ever live streamed a Broadway show.
And it got us thinking, why was it important for this show right now to be seen by the masses? And I saw it in the theater with my parents, and you watched the live stream the other night.
So obviously we felt the need to make the segment about it because the show is about journalism. It's about Edward R. Murrow, who's this legendary journalist who actually worked at CBS. It felt like it was obviously very timely with everything going on now.
The main theme is sticking to the truth in journalism and sticking to journalistic integrity, even when you're under immense pressure from powerful people, politicians, to not. And our former employer, 60 Minutes, right now being sued by the Trump administration. And because Paramount, who is their parent company, wants to stay on good terms with the Trump administration, they are putting pressure on 60 Minutes to run more favorable stories or to just maybe censor the more critical details. And this has been kind of unfolding for the world to see as this play was on Broadway.
And the subject matter was also pretty interesting because, the piece that George Clooney is trying to run in the show is basically about these communists that are being targeted, these alleged communists that are being targeted by politicians like Joseph McCarthy and the Red Scare and being persecuted without due process. Those are also themes that we're seeing today with raids and riots and the question of due process and how important that is, especially when it's framed as these people are a threat to the country. So we always think of the time that we're living in as so unique, but it's really interesting to see why this play was so important. It was broadcast by CNN because it is important for the world to connect the dots.
It even ends with a montage of news coverage from Murrow's days, edited together to present day to show the through line. And I thought George Clooney did such a good job.
So the question is a very simple one. Not what power unchecked can do. We have seen that answer. The question is, what are you prepared to do?
He actually wrote the script for the play and for the movie of the same name that came out a while ago. And in the movie, he doesn't play Murrow. And he said at the time he didn't feel like he had the gravitas to pull off this figure. But since then, he's gotten married, he's become a father, he's aged, and now he feels like he can pull that off. And I thought he really did.
Yeah, and it did feel authentic. He is so involved in politics and stuff now. Remember when Joe Biden was still running, he was kind of one of the first people to come out and be I'm not sure if that should be the case. So after CNN ran the Broadway play, there was even an Anderson Cooper, George Clooney interview moment where George Clooney was just talking about the importance of journalism to the public and how difficult it is for correspondents to kind of push back on corporations that are obviously trying to make money and how journalism needs to speak truth to power and stuff. So he seems very passionate about the cause.
Yeah, because of that, because of all his influence, it was really thrilling to be in the theater and be so close to him while he was portraying Edward R. Murrow. And I was wondering how that would translate, because part of the magic of going to any live event is that you're in the room where it happens. If it's a concert or whatever, you're seeing this person so up close. And then if you're watching that through a screen, you don't get that added element. So do you feel like it still translated without that?
I think the plot and the story and the performances have to stand so strong to translate onto the screen. I do think they did such a good job. Even the framing, I was surprised by this. I thought the framing of a Broadway show is you see the stage. That's not what it was. It was super zoomed in. So it kind of looked like a TV show.
Well, they said they had 20 cameras.
Yeah.
But didn't you think Alana Glazer was so bad?
I thought she was awful.
So bad.
Awful. But apparently she's a producer.
Yeah, no, exactly. And she's the biggest name other than George Clooney.
There was also, I mentioned, a CNN panel after the show that I actually wanted to talk to you about because we haven't discussed this yet. Basically, there's Anderson Cooper moderating, and then there's 5 big journalists that were there, Kara Swisher, Connie Chung, a New York Times op-ed editor, just big people. And they were all talking about the role of journalism because a big part of the play was the difference between objective journalism and advocacy journalism. And it was interesting because it was an hour conversation where half the journalists on this panel thought that advocacy journalism is necessary nowadays. You need to have a voice. You need to push for kind of an agenda with your reporting. Whereas there's this New York Times op-ed editor who's it's our job to be super objective. That's why the audiences have lost trust in media. So it was a very interesting conversation. Did you take away those things from the play at all? Because that was a big thing. What do you think about that?
the biggest news creators, especially digitally, are very biased. Like you can't really, if you're independent, especially, and we'll come back to networks too, but if you're independent, you are not going to gain a following unless you have hot takes and unless you have a clear perspective, because that's what people want to follow. They want to be like, yes, like they want to be fired up by what you're saying. And like, I agree with you so much. And like, I want to follow you. And that's something we've really had to reconcile on the show. And we go to great lengths to stay as unbiased as possible, but still we want to hold truth to power. And we don't want to like drain all of the color from our reporting to be so unbiased. And I remember when we got this podcast deal and we were telling our colleagues at 60 Minutes, one of my mentors told me to lean in to being biased because she saw that that was what young audiences wanted. So even though she has like made her whole career being completely unbiased, she thinks those days are over and she thinks advocacy journalism is where it's at.
Yeah, I remember when you said that and it was so surprising. And it did seem like on the panel, most people did lean that way. I feel like also just like getting facts isn't that hard anymore. Like we have our phones, like we can open them and we get like 10 news alerts of what's going on. Like the service that journalists can provide is like educational analysis and commentary, which obviously opens the door to more bias. It's not like we all like set out trying to be biased, but it's like if you add more, like we always do this when we're writing scripts, we're like, okay, like should we add a little bit more? Like should we say what we think because of the things that we've learned? Or is that like treading territory where we're introducing bias? Like it is an interesting place to be in. Murrow was there, you know, decades ago when he first started introducing a POV in reporting. And now we're here where that is kind of the like status quo.
And that makes journalism still as important as ever, but maybe in a different way. And Scott Pelley, who is a correspondent for 60 Minutes, who we worked with, has been really speaking out about this. He did the commencement address at Wake Forest University just a few weeks ago, and that went really viral.
Our sacred rule of law is under attack. Journalism is under attack. Universities are under attack. Freedom of speech is under attack. And insidious fear is reaching through our schools, our businesses, our homes, and into our private thoughts.
So after the play, he spoke with Anderson Cooper. They both obviously work at 60 Minutes. And that was even just kind of like fun to see because we know working for the show, like the correspondents don't like work with each other. They work with their production teams. You don't really see them too often like interacting. So it's these two huge journalists that obviously like respect each other, having this like candid conversation about where journalism is today. And yeah, like something that we both loved that he said was that journalism is the only career that is guaranteed protections in the Constitution, which is so true. Like freedom of the press, like
the First Amendment.
It guarantees, he kept saying, the rights of everything else.
Yeah, and we have seen it under attack. Like we've reported about Trump blocking the AP from the press room. And of course, he sued ABC and they buckled to him to some extent. And now he's suing CBS and they appear to be doing the same thing. Just a few weeks ago, the executive producer of 60 Minutes resigned from the show because of the pressure he felt was on him to start censoring the show. He has maintained that they haven't censored the show so far, but he just feels the pressure and like doesn't want to be there in case it gets worse. And I listened to a podcast that the correspondent Leslie Stahl did speaking about the resignation of the executive producer. And she said she wanted to resign and Scott Pelley wanted to resign, but that he said, you need to stay. Like there do need to be some guardians from the old guard, I guess.
I guess now there's just more space for, like we're saying, like young digital creators to come in and have POVs, but network media is always going to be there and is always going to be necessary to do, you know, the deep dives and the research that all of us can't do. So yeah, like the field is really changing, but it's just as important as ever. And it was cool to see these huge stars that also think that and like are streaming it for everyone to see because it is so timely.